The northern expedition marched straight on through the riots. Its commander, Chiang Kai-shek, pledged to protect all the foreigners in the city. Shanghai prepared to receive the Western women and children evacuated downriver from Hankou to temporary safety. They believed Shanghai would be secure. Military reinforcements were hurriedly drafted in. Sikh soldiers of the British Army were among 22,000 foreign troops in Shanghai for that crucial spring of 1927. They closed the gates of the international settlement against hundreds of Chinese people trying to escape the coming storm. As the settlement was sandbagged, the Chinese city beyond was in a fever of anticipation. Local communists were organizing the welcome for the northern expedition. On March the 21st, the labor union launched a general strike and armed insurrection against the local warlord.
We got out some celebration firecrackers that we'd bought, big ones and small ones, and local people helped us to get them ready. The small ones went off like machine guns. The big ones were really noisy. We didn't know they weren't real guns. What they heard was the rattle of machine guns resounding all around them, and the big crackers going off with a big bang. We shouted, "Charge!"
The National Liberation Army had grown on the way as warlord troops changed sides. Its victory in Shanghai was the high point of this first stage of the military drive to unify China. But the political coalition was cracking. Chiang Kai-shek had no time for the communists or for the left wing of his own KMT nationalists. Even his supporters find it hard to justify what happened next.
On the northern expedition, the troops of the warlords that we recruited and their officials, their thought diluted our revolutionary thought. Do you know what I mean? We ourselves were contaminated by their bureaucratic thinking. It was a military success, our northern expedition, but our politics had gone on a southern expedition.
At that time, I got caught. I was locked up in a back room at their headquarters. At 3 o'clock, they started to hit me. They hit my legs to make me confess I was a communist. I said, "I don't know. What's a communist?" "Who are you then?" "I'm a worker. I just want liberation." So they locked me up again.
Mr. Sun was one of the very few Shanghai communists who survived the White Terror. Revolution is a bitter thing, said the author Lu Sun. Mixed with filth and blood, not so lovely or perfect as the poets think. Thousands of suspected communists were executed in a few weeks. In Shanghai, there was never any shortage of men who would murder for money. Chiang Kai-shek's massacre of the communists was carried out by the infamous secret society, the Green Gang. From their origins as a guild protecting the river boatmen, the gang had evolved into a sinister mafia. Chiang's friendship with them brought him into alliance with organized crime, controlling the docks, the river, and the opium trade. Their leader, Du Yuesheng, drug baron. His prize was the job of chief of the new Bureau of Opium Suppression. For form's sake, some opium was burned. The North China Daily News published a guide, How to Spot Communists at Moving Picture Shows and Other Public Gatherings. Chiang Kai-shek celebrated with a wedding. He married well. His bride, a wealthy, Western-educated Christian, Sung Mei-ling. Shanghai went back to what it knew best, the glamour and the dancing. A feverish round of parties for the rich Chinese families who had done well out of contact with the West.
Nighttime in dear old Shanghai, then I'm dancing, sweetheart, with you.
But behind the dazzle, for the rich, life in Shanghai would never be the same. Chiang launched a reign of terror against them.
In my arms, dear, away from harm, dear, we'll let the rest of the world go by.
Desperate to raise money to finance his army, he coerced vast sums from wealthy Chinese industrialists and bankers. $50 million came from ransoms on their children, kidnapped by his Green Gang friends. In Shanghai in those days, nothing was as it seemed. The communists had been driven from the city, yet their future secret police chief, Kang Shung, was undercover in disguise as a rickshaw boy. The left was down, but not out.
It was during the White Terror. The League of Left-Wing Writers did a lot of dangerous work. They had to keep on the move, usually about once a month. So I was able to give them a lot of help. I could help with moving their printing presses. It was very difficult then to get things printed and do our propaganda work, so we had to print our leaflets ourselves. Because I was young, no one would take much notice of me if I loaded things onto a rickshaw cart and took them away. So that's how I started on the road to revolution. It was poor, really poor. The minute you went out, you'd be surrounded by beggars. They were selling their sons and daughters. As a schoolgirl, seeing this kind of society, after all, I was Chinese. No Chinese person wants their society to be like that.
What is the greatest force? Asked the communist Mao Zedong. The greatest force is the union of the popular masses. What should we fear? We should not fear heaven. We should not fear ghosts. We should not fear the dead. Shanghai remained fertile ground for the revolutionaries. The chance of work, even on the docks run by the Green Gang, was drawing more and more people to the city.
We all came from the countryside. We had no choice. We couldn't stay at home. We'd rented our land from the landlord. We had to pay him back in grain every year. It didn't matter if we had a harvest or not. We had to give him something. There was no way out. So we came to Shanghai.
I'm from north of here, and I came to Shanghai. I worked on the docks, but it was very hard work. And then I didn't know anyone. It was a good job I could do the heavy physical work. The contractors came one by one to look you over. If they thought you looked strong enough, they'd take you on. Every time we had to line up and wait to be called up. That's the way it was in the past. You never knew if you'd get work the next day. You might get work today, but you didn't know about tomorrow. That's the way it was in the old days.
If you got work on my dock, you weren't allowed to work on another dock as well. If you wanted to work on another dock, you had to give them money, otherwise they wouldn't give you a job. How much did you pay them? You had to give them at least 2 bags of rice. They wanted rice because rice was like money then. Yangtze riverboats had no engines in those days. They had to be hauled along by men. We sang as we hauled. Why did we have to sing songs? It was because you needed 4 people to carry things, not just 2, one at each corner. That's what we'd sing. We had to sing in unison. You couldn't do it without singing. If we didn't sing, we couldn't keep pace.
Mr. Pan and Mr. Chung still sing together. Now they're part of the Shanghai Coal Handling Dock Workers Union Choir. They commemorate the end of the bad old days, of capitalism, imperialism, and of Chiang Kai-shek. Chiang and his nationalist KMT defeated the warlords. But their northern expedition could not save the Middle Kingdom from weakness, poverty, or the foreign devils. For Shanghai, the question remained the same one raised by a reformer of the 1850s. The most unparalleled anger which has ever existed since the creation of heaven and earth is exciting all who are conscious in their minds and have spirit in their blood. Their hats are raised by their hair standing on end. This is because the largest country on the globe today is yet controlled by small nations of barbarians. Why are they small and yet strong? Why are we large and yet weak? On the top floor and roof of that house of multiple joys, a jumble of tightrope walkers slithered back and forth, and there were seesaws, Chinese checkers, mahjong, strings of firecrackers going off, lottery tickets and marriage brokers. Joseph von Sternberg, the film director, described this place in the 1930s. The Great World Amusement Center stands today, and though it's no longer quite so glittering as the director observed, Ding Jing Tang still comes here.
The Great World is a very interesting place. I used to come here very often when I was still a schoolboy. That's starting in 1931, when I was only 11 years old. There's a saying, if you haven't been to the Great World, you haven't really been to Shanghai. The Great World is very well known to everyone all over China. It's very famous. People who come to the Great World are all very ordinary people. In the old days, there was one aspect of the Great World which was not so good. Hooligans and prostitutes wandered all round here, and that was not good.
Von Sternberg saw girls whose dresses were slit to the armpits, peep shows, rubber goods, and 2 love letter booths with scribes who guaranteed results. Outside, the street for saying goodbye to girls, Prostitute Lane. There were 700 brothels in the international settlement alone. Thousands of girls drawn to the great city of Shanghai, its filthy slums no hindrance to their desperate need for money. To this day, Shanghai, Paris of the East, is a byword for glamour in China.